Look up at the night sky. You're not seeing the universe as it is. You're looking at a graveyard of light. Every star, every distant galaxy, every faint smudge of illumination that finally reaches your retina is a ghost, a luminous fossil recorded thousands, millions, or even billions of years ago. We are taught from a very young age that the speed of light is the ultimate cosmic limit, the absolute pinnacle of velocity in the physical universe. We hear the number, nearly 300,000 kilometers every single second, and our mammalian brains, evolved to understand the speed of a thrown spear or a running predator, simply categorize it as instantaneous. We imagine light zipping across the dark void like a laser in a science fiction film, connecting distant worlds in the blink of an eye. But the universe does not care about our biological intuition. In the true, terrifying scale of the cosmos, the speed of light is not a galactic express lane. It is an agonizing, microscopic crawl. It is a solitary snail inching its way across the Pacific Ocean in the pitch black. Consider the nearest star system to our own sun, Alpha Centauri. It is roughly 4 light-years away. If an advanced alien civilization stationed there were to look at Earth right now through an impossibly powerful telescope, they would not see you. They would not see our modern cities, our sprawling satellite networks, or our technological triumphs. They would see the Earth exactly as it was 4 years ago. And that is our immediate next-door neighbor, a civilization practically touching our front porch in the grand galactic geography. If we scale this up just a fraction, the existential horror of the cosmic speed limit truly begins to reveal itself. A civilization situated on the opposite side of our own Milky Way galaxy, peering at our solar system tonight, would see an Earth populated by early human ancestors just learning to shape stone. A civilization in the Andromeda galaxy, our nearest major galactic neighbor, would see an Earth where early mammals were just beginning to scurry beneath the heavy feet of dinosaurs. They are seeing an ancient vanished past, and we are looking at theirs. The universe is fundamentally disconnected, entirely fractured by the abysmal slowness of its own light. This terrifying delay is not merely a quirk of astronomical observation. It is a physical, insurmountable barrier. It is the ultimate quarantine protocol of the cosmos. If you are captivated by the profound, indifferent mysteries of the universe and wish to explore the dark, quiet reality of space, subscribe and join us on this journey. We are going to deconstruct the greatest illusion of astrophysics. We are going to look at the cold, hard mathematics of cosmic distances to understand why, even if the universe is teeming with advanced alien empires, the speed of light practically guarantees they will never ever reach us. To understand the invisible cage we are trapped in, we first have to understand the architect of our own deception. Human biology is a strictly terrestrial mechanism. Our brains, our sensory organs, and our deeply ingrained neurological reflexes were forged in the harsh crucible of a small, rocky planet over millions of years of brutal survival. We evolved to calculate the trajectory of a thrown spear, to anticipate the sudden sprint of a predator through the tall grass, and to judge the lethal fall of a stone from a cliff. In this localized, gravity-bound arena, speed is a tangible, physical concept. It is something we can feel in the vibration of the earth and the rush of wind against our faces. But light was never perceived by our ancestors as an object in motion. For the entirety of human history, light was simply the underlying condition of reality itself. It was the absolute state of the waking world. The sun crested the horizon, and instantly the valley was illuminated. You open your eyes, and the jagged mountain peak in the distance is simply there, fully rendered in your vision. Light was not a traveler crossing the landscape. It was the stage upon which all traveling occurred. The only clue our planet ever gave us regarding the delay of information was the lag between the blinding flash of lightning and the crushing roar of thunder. We understood that sound took time to drag itself through the dense atmosphere, but the flash itself, the flash was immediate. It was the gold standard of the present moment. This biological programming created a fatal flaw in our intuition. It built a mental architecture where light is synonymous with the concept of now. We still carry this ancient, primitive assumption into the modern technological era. When we flip a switch in a dark room, The space floods with brightness, and our primitive brains register the event as utterly instantaneous. This illusion is so persistent, so deeply embedded in our cognitive wiring, that dismantling it requires a violent rupture of common sense. We have to forcibly tear away the comforting, intuitive blanket of terrestrial physics and step into the cold, unintuitive architecture of the deep cosmos. For centuries, the greatest minds in human history operated under the absolute certainty that the speed of light was infinite. Prominent philosophers and early scientists argued that light was not a physical substance moving through space, but rather an instantaneous pressure transmitted through the universe, like a solid stick being pushed at one end and immediately moving at the other. To suggest otherwise was to challenge the very nature of divine creation. If light took time to travel, it meant there was a gap between reality occurring and reality being perceived. It meant the universe was capable of keeping secrets. The first profound cracks in this illusion began to form in the early 17th century, driven by the restless, deeply skeptical mind of Galileo Galilei. He was perhaps the first human to seriously suspect that light was not an instantaneous presence, but a physical entity that had to traverse distance, subject to the constraints of time. Galileo devised an experiment of elegant, almost poetic simplicity. He and an assistant stood on distant hills in the Italian countryside in the dead of night, each holding a lantern equipped with a mechanical wooden shutter. The premise was straightforward. Galileo would violently open his shutter, sending a single flash of light across the dark valley. The very fraction of a second the assistant saw the flash, he was instructed to open his own shutter in response. By measuring the minute delay between opening his lantern and seeing the return flash from across the valley, Galileo hoped to calculate the velocity of this elusive phenomenon. The experiment, of course, was a spectacular, almost comical failure. The light crossed the valley, struck the assistant's eyes, and returned back to Galileo faster than the human hand could ever twitch, faster than the human eye could even register a sequence of distinct events. To Galileo's biological senses, the delay was indistinguishable from absolute zero. But the failure was profoundly illuminating. It did not prove that light was infinitely fast. Rather, it proved that the human biological apparatus was hopelessly, tragically inadequate to measure it. The speed of light was a phenomenon entirely divorced from the scale of human experience. It was as if a microscopic organism living on a grain of sand were attempting to measure the speed of a shifting tectonic plate. The conceptual framework was sound, but the ruler he was using was completely useless. It became glaringly obvious that to catch something this incomprehensibly fast, we could no longer use the rolling hills of Earth. We had to use the vast, dark, freezing theater of the solar system. The true terrifying revelation came decades later, in the bitter cold of an observatory in Paris, through the meticulous, almost obsessive observations of a Danish astronomer named Ole Rømer. Rømer was not actively searching for the speed of light. He was engaged in a massive astronomical mapping project, looking at Jupiter and specifically charting the orbit of its innermost moon, Io. In the late 17th century, the intricate swirling dance of Jupiter's moons was the most precise mechanical clock available to humanity. Io orbited the immense gas giant with terrifying regularity, slipping into Jupiter's massive dark shadow and emerging on the other side in a perfectly predictable rhythm. It was a celestial pendulum swinging relentlessly in the dark void. But as Rømer recorded the eclipses month after month, he noticed a deeply unsettling inconsistency. The flawless celestial clock was broken. As the Earth moved in its own orbit around the Sun, swinging closer to Jupiter, the eclipses of the moon Io seemed to happen earlier than his strict mathematical models predicted. When the Earth moved further away, retreating to the opposite side of the solar system, the eclipses dragged on, occurring later and later, delayed by a matter of minutes. The celestial mechanics of Jupiter and its moons were unyielding, governed by massive gravitational forces, so the orbital bodies themselves were absolutely not changing their speed. There was only one horrifyingly elegant explanation for this discrepancy. The optical signal itself was being delayed. Imagine a massive, sprawling city completely devoid of life at 3 in the morning, illuminated only by a distant, pulsing lighthouse at the edge of the bay. If you sprint toward the lighthouse, you meet the outward radiating pulses of light slightly faster, cutting into the distance they have to travel. If you turn and walk away into the dark streets, it takes progressively longer for each subsequent pulse to chase you down. Roma realized that the empty void of space was not a magical vacuum where things simply happened all at once. Space was a physical medium of transit. The light reflecting off the surface of Io had to physically cross the expanding and contracting gulf of the solar system to reach the glass lenses of his telescope in Paris. For the very first time in the history of our species, the speed of light was dragged down from the realm of the infinite and given a finite, quantifiable number. And suddenly, the universe was no longer a stage of instantaneous, connected events. It was revealed to be a massive, sprawling network of delayed signals, a cosmic server struggling with immense, inescapable latency. This realization, however, was merely the prologue to a much darker, much more restrictive truth. The true architecture of this cosmic prison was not fully drawn until the 19th century, when the brilliant physicist James Clerk Maxwell united the seemingly disparate forces of electricity and magnetism. Through a series of profound mathematical deductions, Maxwell demonstrated that changing electric and magnetic fields create invisible ripples. These ripples propagate through the absolute vacuum of space, like relentless waves crashing across a dark ocean. When he calculated the precise speed at which these electromagnetic waves must travel to sustain themselves, the cold mathematics yielded a very specific, undeniable velocity. It matched the astronomical measurements of the speed of light perfectly. Light was not just a bright beam shining in the dark. It was a fundamental vibration of the electromagnetic field itself. It was the universe humming. But Maxwell's mathematics revealed a merciless truth, one that would completely shatter the classical foundations of reality that had stood since the days of Isaac Newton. The mathematical framework did not care how fast you were moving when you measured this wave. In our intuitive terrestrial world, if you throw a heavy iron ball forward from a speeding train, the speed of the ball is logically added to the speed of the train. Speed is always relative to the observer. But the rigid equations governing light absolutely refused to behave this way. They dictated that the speed of light is structurally woven into the very fabric of the empty vacuum. It is a fundamental constant, a fixed, unyielding gear in the cosmic clockwork that cannot be forced to spin any faster, regardless of the observer's motion or the energy applied. This logical paradox lay dormant in the world of physics like an unexploded piece of ordnance, until Albert Einstein finally detonated it at the dawn of the 20th century. If the speed of light is absolute, and it must remain exactly the same for every single observer in the universe, regardless of how incredibly fast they are hurling through the void, then something else in the structure of reality has to break. The universe has to make a monumental sacrifice to maintain this ultimate speed limit, and the sacrifice it makes, chillingly, is the stability of space and time itself. Einstein realized that space and time are not a rigid, empty stage, with a ticking master clock in the background, keeping a universal standard of now. They are deeply malleable. They are flexible. If you were to construct a hyper-advanced spacecraft and attempt to chase a beam of light, firing colossal engines to catch up to it, you would never see the light slowing down relative to your window. It would always recede from you at that exact, unforgiving speed. Instead of the light changing, the universe intervenes on your own physical existence. The closer you get to that forbidden velocity, the more the very fabric of reality distorts to actively stop you. Time itself begins to drastically slow down for you compared to the rest of the stationary universe. The seconds ticking on the dashboard of your ship stretch out into agonizingly long intervals, dilating in ways that defy human comprehension. Simultaneously, the physical space you are attempting to traverse begins to compress, shrinking along the direction of your desperate travel. You become a prisoner running toward the stone walls of a cell, but with every step you take forward, your legs move slower. Your perception of the passing days grinds to a halt, and the walls themselves stretch infinitely further away. The mathematics of relativity act as an inescapable draconian governor on the engine of physical reality. To accelerate an object possessing even a microscopic fraction of mass to the exact speed of light, You would need to pump an infinite amount of energy into its propulsion. It is not a mere engineering hurdle waiting to be solved by better thrusters, anti-gravity fields, or exotic dark matter fuels. It is a profound structural impossibility. The universe demands infinite energy to break the barrier, a concept that simply does not exist in a finite physical cosmos. Because of this, the concept of a universal present moment is a complete hallucination. There is no universal now. If a star explodes halfway across the galaxy, it has not happened for us yet. It will not happen for us until the agonizingly slow wave of radiation finally washes over our planet thousands of years from now. If an alien civilization builds a megastructure around their sun, their present reality is completely severed from ours by the sheer expanse of the void. We are entirely isolated, trapped in a bubble of local time, unable to interact with the broader universe in real time. Therefore, the speed of light is not merely a speed, it is the infinite horizon. It is the absolute limit of causality, the absolute maximum rate at which one physical event can affect another across the dark expanse. It is the uncompromising boundary line between the possible and the impossible, drawn by the cold laws of physics. And yet, this ultimate untouchable speed, this magnificent pinnacle of cosmic velocity that warps time and crushes space, is devastatingly, almost laughably inadequate for the sheer, terrifying scale of the void it is supposed to cross. We revere it as the ultimate speed, the pinnacle of physical motion, yet when we cast it out into the terrifying abyss of the deep, expanding universe, we see it for what it truly is, a desperate, crawling spark, struggling blindly against an ocean of endless, expanding dark. To comprehend the suffocating isolation of our reality, we must first measure the cage. We must look at the physical architecture of the void that surrounds us and translate the incomprehensible numbers of astronomy into a terrifying, visceral truth. Our daily lives are governed by the comforting, immediate warmth of our local star. We look up at the sun and feel its heat on our skin, assuming a continuous, instantaneous connection. But that heat, that blinding yellow glow, is a delayed transmission. The sun is separated from the Earth by a gulf of 150 million kilometers of violent irradiated vacuum. Even at its absolute maximum velocity, tearing through the emptiness of the inner solar system, the light radiating from the solar photosphere takes 8 long minutes and 20 seconds to cross that gap and strike our atmosphere. If the sun were to suddenly extinguish at this exact moment, completely vanishing from existence due to some cataclysmic rupture in physics, you would not know. The sky would remain brilliant blue. The birds would continue to sing. Humanity would carry on its chaotic, oblivious existence for 8 entire minutes, basking in the phantom light of a dead star, entirely unaware that the executioner's axe had already fallen. We are perpetually living in the sun's past, trapped in a mandatory time delay dictated by the rigid mechanics of the universe. And yet in the grand, terrifying geography of the cosmos, those 8 minutes are less than a microscopic fraction of a single breath. To truly grasp the agonizing slowness of light, we must look out toward the freezing, desolate frontier of our own solar neighborhood, to the lonely vanguard of human engineering. Far beyond the warm, rocky planets, beyond the swirling gas giants and the icy debris of the Kuiper Belt, drifts the Voyager 1 space probe. Launched in the late 1970s, it is the farthest and fastest physical object ever created by human hands. It is a masterpiece of 20th century engineering, a fragile assembly of aluminum, antiquated electronics, and a decaying heart of radioactive plutonium hurtling through the dark at a staggering speed of over 17 kilometers every single second. To a human observer, 17 kilometers per second is a violent, almost incomprehensible velocity. It is fast enough to cross an entire continent in a matter of minutes. But against the sheer, crushing scale of the interstellar void, Voyager is practically paralyzed. It has been flying continuously, relentlessly, for decades, piercing deeper and deeper into the unknown darkness. Yet, when the engineers down on Earth need to send a command to this aging machine, pulsing a radio signal out into the deep at the absolute speed of light, that signal does not reach the probe instantly. it must traverse the immense, silent graveyard of the outer solar system. That invisible wave of electromagnetic energy, traveling at the ultimate speed limit of reality, takes nearly an entire day to simply catch up to the probe. And then, humanity must wait another entire day in dead silence just to receive the faint, whispering confirmation that the command was heard. 48 hours of agonizing latency for a simple digital handshake. This staggering delay is the reality of communicating with an object that is still, cosmically speaking, in our own backyard. Voyager 1 has barely scratched the true outer boundary of the solar system, a hypothetical spherical shell of dormant, frozen comets known as the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is so unfathomably massive, extending so far into the blackness, that Voyager, maintaining its blistering speed of 17 kilometers per second, will not even reach its inner edge for another 300 years. And it will take the dying probe another 30,000 years of silent, freezing flight just to emerge from the other side. This is where the human mind begins to buckle under the weight of the mathematics. The numbers stop making sense and become abstract concepts of terror. When we look past the Oort cloud, out toward the nearest neighboring star system, Alpha Centauri, we face a gulf of empty space that defies any terrestrial analogy. Alpha Centauri is approximately 4.2 light-years away. That means the light we see tonight left those stars over 4 years ago. But distance measured in time masks the true physical horror of the gap. If we were to shrink the entire sun down to the size of a single grain of sand and place it on a table, the Earth would be a microscopic speck of dust orbiting barely an inch away. In this vastly reduced scale, where our entire solar system fits in the palm of your hand, how far away is the next nearest grain of sand? Where do we place Alpha Centauri? You would not place it on the other side of the table. You would not place it in the next room. On this scale, to find the next nearest star, you would have to walk over 6 kilometers away, 6 kilometers of absolutely nothing. 6 kilometers of freezing, irradiated emptiness, devoid of any significant matter, just to reach a second grain of sand. The space between the stars is not just empty, it is a profound, hostile desert of unimaginable proportions. The interstellar medium is a vacuum so complete that you could sweep a volume of space the size of the Earth and find less matter than is contained in a single handful of dirt. It is within this paralyzing emptiness that the speed of light reveals its true nature. It is not a cosmic speedster. It is a desperate, exhausted messenger, trying to cross an endless ocean on foot. If an alien civilization thriving on a planet around Alpha Centauri possessed a telescope powerful enough to see the surface of our world, the delay in light guarantees a fundamental disconnection. If we were to detonate a massive nuclear weapon to signal our presence, the flash would take over 4 years to reach their lenses. If they immediately fired a laser back in acknowledgement, we would not see it for another 4 years. Nearly a decade of dead silence for a single exchange of light. Meaningful dialogue is assassinated by the physics of distance. But Alpha Centauri is merely our closest neighbor in a sprawling, chaotic metropolis of stars. When we pull the camera back, the scale of the mystery expands from terrifying to utterly apocalyptic. Our solar system is located in one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy, a swirling, majestic disk containing somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars. The architecture of this galaxy is so immense that our brains simply refuse to process the geometry. To cross the Milky Way from one edge to the other, traveling precisely at the absolute limit of reality, riding a beam of light through the dense clouds of interstellar dust and the violent radiation of dying suns, the journey would take 100,000 years. Imagine the sheer weight of that timeline. 100,000 years ago, human beings were barely mastering the use of fire and stone tools, huddling in caves for warmth against the unforgiving elements. If an ancient godlike civilization, residing on the far side of the Milky Way, had detected the faint chemical signatures of life in our primordial atmosphere back then, and fired a powerful light-speed beacon directly at the Earth to make contact, that beam of light has been traveling through the void for the entirety of human history. It has flown silently past exploding supernovas, navigated the terrifying gravitational tides of rogue black holes, and crossed thousands of light years of empty, freezing darkness. And tonight, as you look up at the sky, that ancient signal is still only halfway here. The Milky Way is a cemetery of lost time. Any civilization attempting to communicate across this galactic expanse is essentially shouting into a bottomless well, hoping that a distant, unborn generation might eventually hear the echo. We could be sharing this galaxy with millions of vibrant, advanced empires, but the speed of light enforces a brutal isolation. We are quarantined in our own specific epoch, unable to perceive the contemporary existence of anyone else. We only ever see the phantoms of the past. And yet the Milky Way is just a single insignificant island in an archipelago of billions. Beyond the borders of our galaxy lies the true mind-bending expanse of the intergalactic void. To peer into this abyss, humanity has constructed mechanical eyes of staggering complexity, monuments of engineering designed specifically to harvest the ancient, exhausted light of the deep universe. The James Webb Space Telescope stands as our ultimate attempt to cheat the cosmic delay. Positioned over 1 million kilometers away from the Earth, floating in the freezing darkness of an orbital Lagrange point, this observatory is a masterclass in extreme physics. It is protected by a sun shield the size of a tennis court, a delicate structure of specialized hyper-thin membranes that block the intense heat of the sun, plunging the instruments into a state of near absolute zero. It has to be this cold. The James Webb does not look at the universe through visible light, the kind our biological eyes can process. It is designed to capture infrared radiation, the faint, invisible heat signatures of the most distant objects in creation. And to gather this ghostly illumination, it relies on a massive segmented mirror, completely plated in microscopic layers of pure gold, stretching over 6 meters across. This golden honeycomb is not just a mirror, it is a time machine. It is a bucket designed to catch rain that has been falling since the dawn of reality. When the James Webb points its golden eye toward a patch of seemingly empty black sky, it stares for days, keeping its sensors locked on the darkest, quietest regions of the void. Slowly, photon by photon, it collects the light from galaxies that exist near the very edge of the observable universe. But this light carries a terrifying mathematical truth. The light from these primordial galaxies did not just travel through a static, empty vacuum. It traveled through a universe that is actively, violently tearing itself apart. Since the moment of the Big Bang, the fabric of space itself has been expanding. It is not that galaxies are flying away from each other through pre-existing empty space, like debris from an explosion. The empty space between the galaxies is physically stretching, generating more distance every single second. This creates an effect on the traveling light that is deeply unsettling. Imagine a siren on an ambulance rushing past you on the street. As it approaches, the sound waves are compressed, creating a higher pitch. As it speeds away, the waves are stretched out, dropping the pitch. This is a basic mechanical reality. Light as a wave suffers the exact same distortion. As the ancient light from the first galaxies began its journey toward our solar system billions of years ago, the universe was smaller, but as the light traveled, the space it was traveling through relentlessly expanded. The physical waves of light were stretched by the very fabric of reality, pulled longer and longer, shifting their color away from the aggressive blue spectrum, down through the visible colors, and deep into the invisible, lethargic red and infrared spectrum. This phenomenon is the ultimate fingerprint of a hostile, expanding reality. The James Webb Space Telescope was built specifically to hunt for this exhausted, stretched-out light. When astronomers analyze the data from these deep-field images, the numbers are devastating. They are capturing the light of galaxies that left their source over 13 billion years ago. We are seeing the universe in its violent infancy, viewing the chaotic birth of the very first stars. But the sheer terror lies not in the age of the light, but in the current location of the source. Because the universe has been expanding the entire time that light was in transit, those distant primordial galaxies are no longer 13 billion light-years away. The relentless stretching of space has carried them far, far out into the deep dark. The mathematics dictate that those specific galaxies are now over 46 billion light-years away from the Earth. They have been swept away by a cosmic tide that is far more powerful than the speed of light itself. And this is where the physical reality of the universe begins to violently conflict with the mathematical limits of the speed of light. We are forced to confront an expanding geometry that operates under a different set of terrifying rules. The scale of the mystery is not just about how vast the distance is, but about how the distance is actively conspiring against us, ensuring that the older the universe gets, the more isolated we become. The dark energy driving this expansion does not care about the physical limits of photons. It is pushing the boundaries of the cosmos outward at a rate that breaks the intuition of classical physics. And as we look deeper into the equations, as we calculate the ultimate trajectory of this expanding dark, we find a structural paradox that threatens to lock humanity in a cage of darkness permanently. The paradox we are faced with is a violent contradiction that seems to tear at the very fabric of everything we know about physics. We are told, with absolute mathematical certainty, that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. It is the unbreakable law of the cosmos, the ultimate speed limit enforced by the rigid geometry of space-time. Yet, when we point our most advanced telescopes into the freezing depths of the intergalactic void, we observe distant galaxies rushing away from us at velocities that completely shatter this limit. They are receding into the dark at speeds far exceeding the velocity of light. This is not an optical illusion. It is a measurable, physical reality. The light from these ancient star systems is being stretched so violently that it bleeds into the invisible infrared spectrum, proof of an acceleration that makes a mockery of Einstein's absolute barrier. To the untrained mind, this looks like a catastrophic failure of physics. It appears that the universe is actively breaking its own fundamental laws, allowing colossal structures of mass and energy to violate the ultimate speed limit. But the universe is never inconsistent. It is simply indifferent to human intuition. The resolution to this terrifying paradox lies in a profound, deeply unsettling distinction regarding the nature of space itself. Einstein's cosmic speed limit applies exclusively to objects moving through space. It is a governor placed upon physical matter and radiation traveling across the stage of reality. But space itself is not an object. The void is not a physical substance bound by the laws of kinetic motion. Space is the stage itself, and the mathematics of general relativity dictate that while nothing can move through the stage faster than light, the stage is free to expand, stretch, and warp at any speed it desires. Imagine two solitary insects placed on a thick, dark rubber band. The insects represent our galaxy and a distant alien empire. The rubber band represents the fabric of empty space between us. No matter how hard these insects push themselves, no matter how much energy they expend, their physical biology restricts them to a maximum crawling speed. This is their localized speed of light. They can never crawl faster than this biological limit. But now imagine that an invisible, immense force grabs both ends of the rubber band and begins to pull. The rubber band stretches violently. The insects themselves are not moving their legs any faster. Locally, they are still crawling at their absolute maximum speed. But the distance between them is compounding exponentially because the material they are walking on is expanding. If the stretching of the rubber band is violent enough, the two insects will be separated at a rate that far exceeds their maximum crawling speed. This is the horrifying reality of dark energy. The vast, empty oceans of space between the galactic superclusters are not truly empty. The vacuum itself possesses an inherent repulsive pressure, a dark energy that fundamentally pushes the fabric of reality apart. And because this expansion is happening in every single cubic meter of empty space simultaneously, the effect is cumulative. The further away a galaxy is from us, the more expanding space there is between here and there, and consequently, the faster that galaxy appears to be receding into the abyss. This creates a chilling, insurmountable boundary known as the cosmic event horizon. It is a spherical wall of darkness surrounding our localized region of the universe. Beyond this invisible barrier, the cumulative expansion of space is happening so rapidly that the distance between us and the galaxies on the other side is increasing faster than the speed of light. This means that if a hyper-advanced civilization located just beyond this horizon were to detonate their own sun today, creating an explosion of unimaginable brilliance. The light from that dying star would never, ever reach our telescopes. The photons would be traveling toward us at the absolute maximum speed allowed by reality, but they would be swimming upstream against a current of expanding space that is simply too fast. They would be running on a treadmill that is accelerating out from under them. The light would never make up the distance. It is permanently, physically severed from our reality. Right now, as you listen to this, thousands of galaxies are crossing that invisible threshold. They are slipping over the edge of the cosmic horizon, their light stretching into infinite oblivion. They are being permanently deleted from our observable universe. The cosmic event horizon is not a physical wall we can touch, but it is a prison cell that is slowly, relentlessly shrinking around us. Over the span of billions of years, as dark energy accelerates the expansion of the void, every galaxy outside of our immediate local group will eventually cross this line and fade to black. The night sky, currently a brilliant tapestry of billions of galactic islands, will be scrubbed completely clean. The distant future of the universe is a featureless, freezing dark, where humanity, or whatever we become, will be utterly alone, trapped in a localized cluster of dead stars, with no visual evidence that the rest of the universe ever existed. Faced with this encroaching darkness and the paralyzing slowness of light, human engineering naturally rebels. If the universe is expanding away from us, the instinctive terrestrial solution is to simply build a faster machine. We dream of massive engines, antimatter propulsion, and colossal generation ships burning with the energy of captive stars. We imagine that the speed of light is merely an engineering hurdle, a technological barrier waiting to be shattered by sheer brute force and sufficient energy. But the cold mathematics of special relativity stand as an unyielding executioner to these dreams. The barrier is not a matter of thrust, it is a structural consequence of mass itself. To understand why we cannot simply accelerate our way out of this quarantine, we must discard the primitive notion that energy and mass are two distinct, separate entities. They are not. They are the exact same cosmic currency, simply existing in different physical states. This equivalence is the terrifying core of relativistic physics. When you ignite the engines of a spacecraft, you are converting potential energy into kinetic energy, pushing the physical mass of the ship forward. In the slow, forgiving environment of Earth, this works perfectly. But as a ship approaches the speed of light, the architecture of reality intervenes. Because mass and energy are fundamentally the same, the colossal kinetic energy you pump into the spacecraft to accelerate it begins to manifest as additional inertial mass. The ship does not physically grow larger or denser, but its resistance to further acceleration increases exponentially. It behaves as if it is becoming heavier. At 10% of the speed of light, the effect is negligible. At 90%, the mathematical curve begins to steepen violently. The engines must burn thousands of times more fuel just to achieve a tiny fraction of additional speed, because the energy being added is actively fighting against the increasing inertia it is creating. As the needle creeps toward 99.9% of the speed of light, the ship becomes a mathematical nightmare. Its resistance to acceleration approaches infinity. To push a physical object possessing even the mass of a single proton precisely to the speed of light would require an infinite amount of energy. It would require you to consume the energy of every star, every black hole, and every burning galaxy in the entire universe. And it would still not be enough. The speed of light is not a speed limit sign on a highway. It is an asymptote. It is a mathematical wall that demands infinite sacrifice to cross. Any civilization attempting to brute force their way across the interstellar void using conventional acceleration will simply crush themselves under the weight of their own kinetic energy long before they ever reach the forbidden velocity. This absolute restriction forces theoretical physicists to abandon acceleration entirely. If we cannot move through the fabric of space faster than light, the only logical alternative is to manipulate the fabric itself. We must cheat. We must find a loophole in the geometry of the void. This desperate theoretical maneuvering gave birth to the concept of the Alcubierre metric, a mathematical framework that describes what science fiction refers to as a warp drive. The mathematics of the Alcubierre metric do not attempt to break Einstein's laws. They maliciously exploit them. The concept relies on the very phenomenon that is currently tearing the universe apart, the malleability of space-time. Instead of building a ship with massive thrusters, you build a ship equipped with a ring of exotic technology designed to violently warp the geometry of the vacuum surrounding it. The mechanism would compress the fabric of space directly in front of the vessel, shrinking the distance to the destination while simultaneously expanding the fabric of space directly behind it. The spacecraft itself does not move. It sits perfectly stationary, encased within a localized bubble of flat, unperturbed space-time. It is the bubble itself that surfs along the manipulated geometry, riding a wave of compressed and expanded reality. Because the ship is not technically moving through its local space, it experiences no acceleration. There are no crushing gravitational forces, no infinite mass dilation, and no localized time distortion. The crew would float in zero gravity, watching the stars outside the bubble distort into streaks of violent blue light, as the bubble itself traverses the galaxy at velocities thousands of times faster than light. The mathematics prove that this is structurally possible. General relativity allows for the extreme deformation of space-time. The loophole exists, but the universe is a profoundly hostile environment, and it does not tolerate cheaters without extracting a devastating toll. While the Alcubierre metric is mathematically sound, the physical requirements to actually generate and sustain this warp bubble plunge us back into the realm of the impossible. To violently expand the space behind the ship, gravity must be reversed. We must generate a repulsive gravitational field, and to achieve this, the mathematics demand a fuel source that breaks the fundamental rules of classical physics: negative mass. We are not talking about antimatter. Antimatter is perfectly normal mass, with an inverted electrical charge. Antimatter obeys the laws of gravity. We are talking about matter that possesses a negative energy density, a substance that, if you pushed it forward, would physically accelerate backward. If you dropped a sphere of negative mass on Earth, it would fall upward, repelled by the gravity of the planet. As far as our observational science can determine, this exotic matter does not exist anywhere in the natural universe. The microscopic phantom fluctuations of the quantum vacuum hint at momentary pockets of negative energy, but harvesting it, stabilizing it, and weaponizing it into a macroscopic ring around a starship requires a manipulation of reality so profound it borders on the divine. Yet the lack of impossible fuel is not even the most terrifying aspect of the warp drive. The true horror lies in the catastrophic physics of the bubble itself. Let us assume for a moment that a highly advanced alien civilization overcomes the engineering impossible. They forge a ring of negative mass, ignite their warp drive, and begin sliding across the galactic arm toward our solar system at phenomenal speeds. As their warp bubble tears through the interstellar medium, it is not traveling through an empty void. The space between stars is filled with trace amounts of hydrogen, cosmic dust, and high-energy background radiation. As the bubble compresses the space in front of it, it sweeps up this interstellar debris. Photons of light, cosmic rays, and stray particles become trapped in the violent gravitational boundary layer of the warp bubble. They are locked in the event horizon of the leading edge, surfing the wave alongside the ship. As the journey continues across thousands of light years, the bubble accumulates a massive churning reservoir of trapped radiation. And because the bubble is moving faster than light, the energy of these trapped particles is blue-shifted to unimaginable extremes. Their frequency is compressed until they become a concentrated wall of pure, lethal energy. The mathematics reveal a merciless conclusion. When the alien ship finally reaches the edge of our solar system and deactivates the warp drive, the bubble collapses. Space snaps back to its normal geometry, and the massive, trapped tsunami of ultra-high energy radiation is violently, instantaneously released directly forward. The deceleration of the warp bubble essentially turns the spacecraft into a cosmic shotgun of apocalyptic proportions. The beam of blue-shifted radiation would be so intense, so devastatingly energetic, that it would instantly vaporize anything in its path. If they aimed their ship at Earth and stopped, the resulting flash of radiation would strip away our atmosphere, boil the oceans, and sterilize the surface of the planet in a fraction of a second. The very act of braking would completely obliterate the world they traveled so far to reach. The mechanics of the warp drive ensure that you can never peacefully arrive anywhere. The loophole is a suicide pact with the geometry of space. We are confronted with a brutal reality. Conventional acceleration is physically impossible due to the infinite mass barrier. Cheating the geometry of space requires non-existent fuel and results in the annihilation of the destination. The physical laws of the universe are not just obstacles to be overcome by clever engineering. They are an active, hostile quarantine system. They are a set of inescapable parameters designed to ensure that the vast, dark islands of the cosmos remain permanently isolated. The math does not care about our curiosity or our profound desire to not be alone. It simply presents a cold, unyielding wall, a wall that forces us to radically reevaluate our place in the grand architecture of reality. If the physical universe actively forbids transit and meaningful real-time dialogue across the interstellar gulf, then the fundamental nature of existence is not one of a shared cosmic community. It is a state of absolute, inescapable quarantine. This realization destroys one of the most comforting and deeply ingrained mythologies of the modern human psyche, the dream of the galactic empire. We have fed ourselves centuries of fiction depicting sprawling federations, unified stellar republics, and massive armadas crossing the Milky Way to conquer or commune. We project our terrestrial history of maritime exploration onto the cosmos, imagining that faster ships will eventually shrink the galaxy just as steamships shrank the oceans. But the speed of light and the unrelenting expansion of the void render these concepts completely infantile. An empire, a federation, or even a simple trading alliance requires a centralized command, a flow of resources, and most importantly, the synchronization of information. If a human colony established on a planet circling a star 50 light-years away decides to rebel against Earth, the Declaration of Independence will take half a century of crawling through the dark vacuum just to reach our receivers. The political retaliation, the military deployment, or even a simple diplomatic response will take another half a century to return. By the time the ships arrive, the rebels will have been dead for decades, replaced by their grandchildren who might not even remember the original reason for the war. You cannot govern a civilization, you cannot enforce laws, and you cannot share a cohesive culture when the latency of a single distress call outlasts a human lifespan. The mechanics of the universe structurally forbid unity on a grand scale. The galaxy is not an ocean waiting to be mapped and connected. It is an archipelago of isolated prison islands, separated by a sea of dark water that swallows time itself. This terrifying latency provides a grim, deeply sobering lens through which to view the greatest mystery of modern astronomy, the Fermi paradox. We look up at a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars, surrounded by an observable universe containing trillions of galaxies, and we ask, with a mixture of arrogance and profound anxiety, where is everybody? Why is the sky so silent? We naturally assume that a highly advanced intelligence would inevitably spread outward, leaving massive detectable signatures of their engineering. We look for Dyson spheres encasing stars. We listen for the rhythmic chatter of artificial radio waves, and we expect to see the interstellar highways of a bustling cosmic civilization. But we are projecting our terrestrial impatience onto a canvas of deep, unfathomable time. The silence of the universe is not necessarily an empty room. It is much more likely a massive, sprawling graveyard of unsent letters and expired signals. Imagine the history of the Milky Way as a sprawling, pitch-black forest at night. Deep within the trees, an alien civilization arises, achieves technological supremacy, and shines a brilliant, desperate flashlight into the dark, hoping to catch the eye of another wanderer. But civilizations, like the stars they orbit, possess a finite lifespan. They consume their planetary resources, they face localized cataclysms, or they simply stagnate, fracture, and fade into the dust. Their flashlight burns brightly for perhaps 10,000 years, an incredibly long, sprawling epic for a biological species, but less than a microscopic fraction of a cosmic second. Then, they extinguish. A million years later, and 50,000 light-years away, another civilization sparks to life in a different corner of the forest and shines their own light. The two flashes of illumination are physically traversing the dark forest, sliding across the void at the absolute limit of reality. But because of the agonizingly slow speed of light, compared to the immense volume of space, the beams simply miss each other. The second civilization looks up into their night sky and sees only a cold, indifferent darkness, because the light from the first civilization has either already washed over their dead primordial planet millions of years ago, or it is still crawling through the void, destined to arrive long after the second civilization has dug its own graves. The galaxy could be teeming with life. It could be an arena of constant chaotic birth and death of brilliant, godlike species. But because the speed of light is so incredibly restrictive, no one ever sees anyone else. We are all transient sparks, flaring up and dying out in complete, terrifying isolation. The timing must be absolutely perfect, a microscopic overlap of existence across an ocean of deep time, just to hear a single fading echo of a dead world. This dictates a brutal reality regarding our search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Any attempt at interstellar communication can never be a conversation. The concept of a dialogue, a back-and-forth exchange of ideas, is a strictly biological, localized phenomenon born on a small rock where sound travels fast enough to allow a reply. When we construct massive radio dishes and beam a highly compressed mathematical message toward a distant star cluster, we are not making a phone call. We are building a monument. We are launching a digital tombstone into the void, etched with the geometric proof of our existence, hoping that tens of thousands of years from now, some unknown, unborn intelligence might stumble upon the decaying wreckage of our signal. To speak to the universe is to engage in a monologue with the deep future. It is a desperate existential scream into a canyon so vast that the echo will not return until the canyon itself has crumbled into dust. A pulse of radio energy does not travel like a focused laser indefinitely. It swells and dilutes, spreading its kinetic energy across a sphere of expanding space until a brilliant transmission becomes a microscopic whisper, barely distinguishable from the chaotic, background static of dying quasars. The aliens we seek, the minds we desperately want to touch to prove we are not alone in this terrifying expanse, are permanently locked in their own temporal bubbles. We can never share a present moment with them. We can only ever act as cosmic archaeologists, sifting through the decayed, heavily redshifted radiation of long-dead empires, reading the diaries of ghosts. And this quarantine protocol applies not just to alien intelligences, but to our own inevitable future. If humanity manages to navigate the perilous bottleneck of its technological adolescence, if we do not boil our planet, poison our atmosphere, or annihilate ourselves in a storm of nuclear fire, we will eventually push outward. Survival demands expansion. We will inevitably send generation ships, massive arcs of steel and ice, or perhaps dormant biological embryos, to the nearest habitable exoplanets orbiting stars like Alpha Centauri, Sirius, or Epsilon Eridani. But the moment those ships cross the interstellar threshold, the unified human species is permanently shattered. The barrier of light speed guarantees that every single colony we establish will instantly become a completely isolated island of evolutionary and cultural development. A colony 10 light-years away cannot rely on Earth for emergency medical supplies, for critical software updates, or for cultural guidance. If a plague wipes out their crops, our transmission of a genetic cure will arrive a decade after they have all starved to death. They are entirely on their own, severed from the mother world by a barrier of time that cannot be negotiated. As centuries bleed into millennia, the sheer latency of communication will dissolve the psychological tether to Earth. The languages will drastically drift, incorporating new words for alien weather patterns and strange orbital mechanics. Their ideologies and philosophies will heavily mutate in the harsh, unforgiving environments of their new suns. The local gravity, the atmospheric pressure, and the specific spectrum of ambient radiation will inevitably, relentlessly begin to alter their biology. They will adapt, and in doing so, they will cease to be human as we understand the word. We will not be a singular, majestic species spreading across the stars. We will be a tree branching out into the dark, and the fundamental rules of the universe dictate that those branches can never, ever touch each other again. If we survive long enough to heavily populate our local stellar neighborhood, we will look through our telescopes at our own descendant colonies, and we will not recognize the strange, alien lights shining back at us. We are destined to become the very extraterrestrials we are currently searching for, alienated from our own children by the insurmountable physics of the void. The tragedy of this biological and cultural isolation is infinitely compounded when we zoom out and remember the encroaching, expanding dark. The cosmic event horizon, the boundary beyond which galaxies are moving away from us faster than light, is not static. It is a slow creeping shadow that is actively, aggressively dismantling the observable universe. The ultimate hidden consequence of this accelerating expansion is that the universe is systematically, intentionally erasing its own history. Right now, we live in a highly privileged momentary epoch of cosmology. We can build observatories on mountain peaks and look deep into the night sky to see the faint glowing embers of the cosmic microwave background, the literal lingering heat of the Big Bang itself. We can observe distant primordial galaxies and calculate the precise age, origin, and expansion rate of reality. We possess the visual, physical evidence required to piece together the violent mechanics of creation. But this evidence is temporary. It is highly perishable, and it has an expiration date dictated by the dark energy stretching the void. Fast forward 100 billion years into the future. The relentless, repulsive pressure of dark energy will have pushed all other galactic clusters beyond the cosmic event horizon. The night sky of Earth, or whatever dead rock our distant descendants inhabit, will be profoundly, terrifyingly empty. There will be no distant spiral arms to photograph. There will be no shimmering ancient nebulas from other galactic clusters to study. The entire observable universe will appear to consist solely of our localized, merged super-galaxy, floating entirely alone in an infinite, featureless black ocean. When the astronomers of that incredibly distant, localized future point their most advanced, hypersensitive telescopes into the deep void, they will see absolutely nothing. No expanding universe, no residual heat from the dawn of time. The expanding geometry of space will have stretched the ancient light of the Big Bang so incredibly far beyond the electromagnetic spectrum that it becomes physically undetectable, its wavelengths longer than the universe itself. They will have no visual, no empirical, and no mathematical evidence that the universe was ever hot, dense, or actively expanding. They will logically, scientifically conclude that their lonely island of stars is all that has ever existed, and all that will ever exist, stationary in an eternal, dark vacuum. The fundamental laws of physics will actively, flawlessly lie to them. The slow, creeping expansion of space is not just isolating us physically, it is a cosmic conspiracy designed to plunge the deep future into a state of absolute, inescapable ignorance, covering its tracks in the dark. We look up at the stars and we feel a profound, almost desperate sense of connection. We see the constellations mapped by our ancient ancestors, and we imagine a grand, sweeping narrative where humanity eventually leaves its terrestrial cradle to take its rightful place among the celestial bodies. We have spent centuries constructing a deeply arrogant, localized mythology that places our biological existence at the very center of an interconnected cosmic community waiting to be discovered. But the unyielding mathematics of the void strip away this comforting delusion with surgical, indifferent precision. The speed of light is not a bridge between worlds. It is the architect of an absolute, unbreakable quarantine. Every single time we peer into the darkness, we are merely sifting through an immense graveyard of exhausted light. The grand, sprawling universe we observe through our lenses is a hallucination composed entirely of expired data. The majestic spiral galaxies, the violent birth of massive nebulas, the slow, agonizing death of distant suns. None of it is actually real in the present moment. We are locked inside a microscopic sliver of local space, fundamentally and permanently severed from the rest of creation by a structural time delay that renders all meaningful physical interaction entirely impossible. The sheer crushing scale of this isolation is terrifying, because it forces us to finally confront our absolute, undeniable insignificance. The cosmos did not design the speed of light to keep us safe. It did not engineer the accelerating expansion of space to protect us from the violent high-energy phenomena of the deep void. The universe simply functions according to a set of cold, blind geometric parameters that possess absolutely no regard for our biological curiosity, our technological triumphs, or our desperate evolutionary need to feel less alone in the dark. We are a momentary, chaotic chemical anomaly, stranded on a fragile rock, surrounded by an endless, expanding desert of freezing radiation. When we hurl our high-powered radio signals out into that dark desert, desperately hoping for a reply, we are shouting into a canyon that is actively, relentlessly pulling itself apart. Our digital transmissions will outlive our atmosphere, our boiling oceans, and the memory of our entire species drifting endlessly through the silent vacuum as decaying mathematical ghosts. They will be intercepted by no one. They will wash over barren, irradiated worlds long after the unknown architects have turned to dust, or they will be stretched into imperceptible, microscopic whispers by the aggressive, unending expansion of space-time itself. There is no ancient galactic federation waiting in the dark to welcome us. There is no grand, cosmic puzzle designed for human intellect to solve. There is only the unrelenting mechanical physics of profound distance. We are passengers on a crippled ship, drifting irreversibly away from every other vessel in the unseen fleet, watching their distant lanterns slowly slip past the event horizon into the pitch black, as the ocean itself stretches into infinity. Look up at the night sky. Absorb the blinding, majestic tapestry of billions of brilliant stars burning against the dark. It is the most beautiful, elaborate illusion in the natural world. You are staring into a massive cosmic museum of dead history, observing the phantoms of a reality that no longer exists. The true present moment belongs entirely to the void, and the void is absolutely, perfectly silent.